Hi. In this series of videos, what I'd like to do is discuss the gods of India and some of the myths and the ways that they're portrayed. Now, when we consider the gods of India, we really have to look at the immense number of gods. There are actually over 10 million gods in the Hindu pantheon. The pantheon just refers to the collection of gods. And so, when talking about these gods and all these different gods and all these different stories, realize that there are different forms of the same god. There are different versions of different stories about the same god. And so I don't think I will get to all 10 million gods. I'll narrow it down a little bit when I discuss these. But let's take a look at this portrayal of Hindu gods here. You can see this, by the way, is actually Vishnu, and the reason you can tell is because of this seven-headed serpent behind his back. But you can see where he's portrayed as having multiple heads, because even though we're directly looking at the face of Vishnu, we're really looking at all gods, because all gods are basically the same. Just as in Hinduism, all of us are at some level manifestations of Atman. So even though we're going to talk about these gods as being separate, realize that they are all different aspects of the same divinity. Now, when we talk about the main gods, we have to talk about basically a group called the Trimurti. The Trimurti is basically the three main gods. God, when considered as God, as just the pure form of God, is Brahman, which is essentially God without any personality or any aspects. It's just the God. And God is so unlimited, it is difficult to narrow God down to any particular aspects. And so Brahman then is divided into three different main aspects, which are Brahma, and the word Brahma and Brahman are related. Brahma is the creator god. We have Vishnu, who represents preservation, and Shiva, who represents destruction or change. And I'll go through these a little bit more detail in a few minutes. Brahma, again, is the creator. He's not referred to as often as the other gods. He's a lot more abstract. He's generally seen with 4 heads. There's a story that he had 5 heads, and one of them was chopped off by a demon. And each of the 4 heads represents one of the 4 Vedas. He's seen to be the source of the Vedas. Here's another depiction of Brahma. And again, there he is with his 4 heads. And you can see in his hands he's holding basically the Vedas, the holy texts of early Hinduism. Now Vishnu is the preserver. He represents the force of preservation. And he's generally shown with these snakes above his head. They're the cosmic primordial snakes. He's actually the one who is associated with the flood myth. He's the one who came and helped the Noah figure find land. You can see in his finger here is something called a yoni, which is basically representative of the female sexual organ or female reproduction, and this is a club which represents warding off evil. Lakshmi is the consort or the woman associated with Vishnu, and she's usually representing wealth and royalty. As a matter of fact, she's usually called Sri Lakshmi, and Sri is a it represents a kind of nobility. Let's see, when we look at her, also sometimes she's associated with wealth, and you can see her hand with coins. She's holding lotus flowers and standing on a lotus flower, which represents wisdom. There are many avatars of Vishnu, and I'll talk about a few of them. One of them is Krishna, another one is Rama, and we'll also look at some other avatars of Vishnu. Krishna is the all-attractive one. He's the subject of the Bhagavad Gita, and he's very playful. And you can see here he is playing a flute, which represents his playfulness. Sometimes he's pictured at play with goat herds, or cow herds, I should say. And there's a story about him with the cow herds where each one of them wanted to be with Krishna, and he told them to close their eyes. This is in the Vishnu Purana. He told them to close their eyes, and they closed their eyes, and he was dancing with all of them, and yet each of them felt that they were individually dancing with him, which shows, again, how unlimited God is, and how each person can establish a relationship with God. That God is big enough to have personal relationships with all of us. Krishna is also seen with a consort by the name of Radha. Now, Radha, according to legend, was married, and her husband was very jealous of Krishna, and so she would go off to worship Krishna in the woods, and she would kneel before him and pray to him and worship him. And what would happen is Krishna knew about her jealous husband, and so what he would do is he would turn himself into the goddess Kali, so that the husband would think that she was worshiping Kali rather than Krishna. But anyway, Krishna and Radha have come to stand for the relationship between God and the individual because of her devotion to Krishna. They end up being a couple themselves. Rama is a warrior, and he's the subject of the Ramayana. In the Ramayana, it's a very long work, but Rama is basically, or Rama's father, I guess, is tricked by one of his father's wives into sending Rama into exile, and Rama, being the dutiful son, goes into exile. Meanwhile, his wife, at one point, Sita, ends up getting kidnapped by a demon by the name of Ravenna, and Rama joins forces with a group of monkeys to fight off the demons that are scourging the earth, and eventually is helped by one of the monkeys by the name of Hanuman. Hanuman is representative of loyalty, and Hanuman actually helps free Rama's wife from the demon, from the castle where she's being held. And so Hanuman, the monkey god, represents loyalty and devotion. And here's a nice picture of Hanuman. I like this one because you can see where he looks like a warrior, and he opens up, and in his heart is Rama and Sita. Beautiful story. For the Hindus also, religious figures like Christ and Buddha are seen as avatars of Vishnu. Now, there are actually different stories about the Buddha and how he relates to Hinduism. Realize, too, that Buddhism is its own separate religion, and they have a whole different perspective on the Buddha. But from the Hindu standpoint, the Buddha was sent either to trick or to question Hinduism, and he represents the god Vishnu. All right. Now, this is the first set of gods. In the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the various avatars and incarnations of the god Shiva.